Keep up with all the election commotion at IBTimes.co.uk.
So, thanks very much for joining us today.
Delighted.
Maajid. This seat is the most marginal in England, and the statistics show that the Tories and Labour are going neck and neck. Where do you fit into this race as the Lib Dem candidate?
Yeah, well, I'm probably the nightmare that both of them wish they didn't have to deal with, because I think they were both hoping to squeeze the Lib Dem vote, especially considering our poll results after last May's local elections. And they ended up with a candidate who's, has his own backstory, has his own position in British public discourse, has a relatively well-known media profile, and it's kind of made it difficult for them to squeeze the Lib Dem vote here. So we are in this constituency at more than double what the Lib Dem party is polling at nationally. I'm hoping to continue the momentum with that. We only know those poll results from last autumn. So, I hope it's gone up since then. And actually, those poll results, they didn't ask the candidate's name. They just asked for party intentions. So I think that my presence here with the work I do in my day job, it lends this campaign in particular a different, what I've called the X factor.
Going back to your day job, obviously you've got a very interesting story from his book ut-Tahrir, being locked up in Egypt and founding, working at the Quilliam Foundation. So what made you want to get involved in this party political arena? Don't you think you'd be better served outside? What was the main motivating factor?
There's a strong case for that, but I think I got to the stage, Quilliam got to the stage in life where it's recognised as its own independent brand, and it's continued to be able to work on a non-partisan basis with all three main parties on the extremism agenda. And I thought that actually what we would also need is, when we often talk about Muslims engaging democratically, Muslims espousing small L liberal values, I thought maybe lead by example, put my money where my mouth is. And it's not easy, of course, getting through the selection process, then getting selected in a seat that is winnable, theoretically, and then, subjecting oneself to the public scrutiny that then follows after that. It's not an easy ride, but I thought that if I can do it, if I can achieve it, then the signal, the message that sends out to young teenage Muslims who are considering which path in life to take, I think is essentially a positive message, that actually here's a guy who used to be an Islamist, who went to prison as a political prisoner, and the democratic system that he then ended up engaging with has embraced him, it's welcomed him. The Liberal Democrat Party has welcomed me with open arms, and it's possible, it's doable, that people can change, and in fact the beauty of democracy is it can absorb all these different types of voices.
One of the hot issues in this constituency is
housing.
Housing, Labour's mansion tax. Where do you think the Lib Dems fit into that narrative? What can you guys do differently to those parties?
Well, so personally and politically. Personally, I am appalled that somebody who's seeking to represent constituents in our capital city cannot afford to live here. I can't afford to buy a house in this constituency. And, that puts me in the same position as many other young professionals. And so I'm passionate about fixing the housing crisis. Politically, I'm delighted that the Labour Party have adopted the mansion tax, because it saves me from having to defend such a regressive idea. I've never supported it. I've been campaigning the Lib Dems from within, campaigning to the party to ask them to change it. I'm happy to say on my website is a letter from Paddy Ashdown, who chairs our General Election Campaign Committee, and we've changed the policy. We now believe in reforming the council tax bands, which is a lot more of a progressive approach, and we've ditched the pejorative term mansion. So I'm happy that we no longer campaign on that policy. And I've never agreed with it. So I think that and the reason actually is because what it does is it stigmatizes people unfairly who live in London. House prices have risen due to no fault of their own. It leaves old ladies who perhaps have been sitting in a house, who are what we know as asset rich and cash poor, potentially facing a huge tax bill for no crime of their own. And also, actually, interestingly, it could end up with an almost perverted scenario of Southerners generally, and Londoners in particular, subsidising services in Scotland when the SNP wants to actually break away from the country. So I think it's an idea which I'm very, very worried about. And I hope that, in fact, that's another thing that can stem the Labour's desire to squeeze Lib Dem votes. I hope this is another reason for why those votes will stay loyal to the Liberal Democrats.
Talking about another policy from the Lib Dems, there seems to be a push towards some aspects of the drug laws to be sort of reformed quite
liberalised,
heavily. Liberalised. Some say towards some parts towards decriminalisation. What's your personal
I'd
take
start
on
with
that?
marijuana, and I'd say I don't think people should go to prison or should be fined for smoking marijuana. I think that there are certain medicinal and other perhaps, I mean, the evidence would need to show this, but I think there are certain, let's just say, personal reasons for why some people would choose to smoke marijuana. I'm personally not a smoker of marijuana, but I don't think that a criminal sanction is fair for that. So I've been actually quite open in my support for the decriminalization of smoking marijuana. I think the point is not that people won't abuse the system. They already are abusing the system, and it's entirely criminalized. Right? So even if we were to put an age limit on it and decriminalize it for adults, you will of course still have some young people abusing that system, as they currently do with alcohol and many other substances, even glue, you know? Yep. So I think the issue is actually, when you decriminalize something, you take the gangs out of business, you raise tax revenue, you decriminalize it for adults, and you police it for young people, and you're able to then, actually, when you've got a narrow, you know, the police forces are actually quite thinly spread, they're able to target and focus their law enforcement kind of efforts where it's needed, which is to stop young people who are susceptible to psychological damage from consuming this. At least they won't be chasing adults anymore.
Obviously, with your background as well, I wanted to ask you about the Lib Dems and the lack of ethnic minority background MPs and representatives in the party. Now, Nick Clegg, the other week, said possibly in the future after the general election, he is thinking about introducing quotas. Where do you stand on that issue?
I've been a long critic of the fact that the Liberal Democrats, who are the party of a fairer society, we've demonstrated it time and time again in government with the fairness measures that we've put in, such as raising the income tax threshold, such as, you know, free school meals, blocking the Tory go-home vans. You know, but yet on this issue, on the issue of ethnic minority representation and female representation in Parliament, we are time and time again performing very poorly. So I'm not happy with that situation. As for quotas, I think it is something to keep an open mind about, but actually, you know, the reason the Lib Dems haven't done it so far is because we prefer to focus on equality of opportunity rather than equality of outcome. In other words, not to fix the outcome, but to fix the means so that people with merit have their voices heard. And we feel that's a more liberal approach so that you don't end up creating more divisions with the identity politics game, when if you put somebody in a position and somebody else loses out in that position because of a quota, even though they may be better qualified, that creates a bit of animosity between people.
So we've talked about the future there. Are you considering becoming an MEP, a councillor going forward? So
I'm considering everything at the moment. My options are open, but I'm not making my mind up, because after May, obviously we're fighting this to win. If in the worst case scenario I don't win, there's a lot to do with Quilliam still, my day job, my organisation challenging extremism, and there are various political avenues open to me. I'm not going to give you a 2 Weetabix, 3 Weetabix commitment as the Prime Minister did, but I will say to you that actually I'm open to kind of the options, and let's see what happens.
What's the main deliberation, well, positive at the moment in your mind to say that on? What's the negative or thing that's holding you back?
Well, see, so of course, the positive is I'm delighted at the way the Liberal Democrats as a party have supported me, and the way in which the work I'm doing through the Liberal Democrats is able to allow me to broaden some of the stuff that I work on, so mental health. And, you know, I see there's a relation actually, because of course the largest killer of young men in this country is suicide. But suicide is a form of internalized violence. Other young men express themselves by externalizing violence, and that's related to extremism. So I think there are transition themes that allow me to speak to other issues about the vulnerability of young men in this society, whether they turn to extremism or suicide. And it allows me to speak about stuff that I care about. So that's a positive. On the downside, maybe what would put me off is, you know, it is a cutthroat game. You know, you have to constantly watch what you're saying, what you're doing, and I'm quite a free soul. I mean, you wouldn't, I joined a radical group at 16 because I kind of, I'm a passionate man, and so the good news is obviously I turned myself around since then, but my character is still quite free and quite passionate, and I'm just worried that maybe I should just continue with what I've been happy doing up until now. So I'm weighing all of these options at the moment.
Final question, obviously we've had a coalition government for 5 years with the Tories. How would you feel about going back into bed, so to speak, with the Tories again? Would you be happy with that? I
think I'd be happy with going into a coalition with any of the two larger parties, though I'd be worried for different reasons with either of them. So I'd require our coalition negotiations to be a lot more robust this time, and I think we're less green-fingered. So I think perhaps we can do that. With the Tories in particular, the issues around constitutional reform and economic policy, in sense of the cuts. I'd be concerned about exactly how we negotiate something that's sensible. With the Labour Party, the size of the state, and other issues such as regionalism versus independence or autonomy. I think these are the issues, the European Union, these are the sorts of issues I think we need to be very robust. What sorts of positions Lib Dem ministers end up with in government. I think perhaps last time we should have had something like, one of the key ministerial positions rather than Deputy Prime Minister. It's all of these issues.
Business Secretary then?
Yeah, that's true, that was good. But these are the sorts of issues that I'd be worried about, but I think actually it is fair and actually right that we begin negotiations with the party that has the more amount of seats. And I'd feel comfortable doing that.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for your time.
Delighted. Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you.